There's a version of home defense that gets sold online. It's clean, it's decisive, and it ends the moment the threat stops. What almost never gets discussed is what happens after the noise, after the movement, after your heart rate finally slows enough for your body to catch up with what just happened. That's where reality begins. I've treated people who survived the initial incident and then died from what followed. Not because they panicked, not because they were careless, but because no one planned for the medical and human realities that come after rounds are fired in tight environments with thin walls and people you care about nearby. I've seen those outcomes in combat zones, on forward operating bases, during medical evacuation, and later in civilian emergency departments. Different places, different circumstances, same pattern. That's the perspective I'm bringing today. I'm a former combat medic with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. I served during Desert Storm and later with Task Force Phoenix in Afghanistan. Today I work as a family nurse practitioner, and I still treat the aftermath of gunshot injuries in emergency rooms and trauma bays. That matters because this conversation is not about tactics. It's not about weapon brands. It's not about ego. It's not about internet arguments. It's about medical consequence. Specifically, how ammunition choice affects survivability, collateral risk, and long-term outcomes in suburban environments when systems fail and help is delayed. I've treated gunshot injuries from nearly every common caliber that civilians own. Handguns, rifles. I've seen which injuries remain manageable with prompt care, and I've seen which ones escalate beyond recovery because of penetration, fragmentation, or delayed treatment. This isn't theory. It's pattern recognition, and patterns matter when you're preparing for worst-case scenarios. In a true collapse scenario, especially in suburbia, the problem is rarely one clean, controlled moment. It's the cascade that follows: elevated heart rate, loss of fine motor control, tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, decision compression, and most importantly, missed shots. Every missed round keeps traveling until something stops it. From a medical standpoint, that's where unintended injuries occur. That's why ammunition choice matters far more than most people want to admit. Today, we're talking about ammunition selection from a medical and preparedness perspective. Not tactics, not marketing, and not caliber wars. Just what increases the odds of stopping a threat while minimizing unnecessary harm to the people around you. From my experience, 4 principles matter more than anything else when deciding what ammunition to stockpile. The first is reliability. Will it function consistently when conditions are poor and stress is high? In a grid-down situation, malfunctions don't just waste time, they increase exposure. I've seen capable people freeze when equipment fails because their entire plan assumed everything would work perfectly. Reliability isn't exciting, but it's foundational. I remember a night in Afghanistan where a soldier's rifle jammed during a close contact. It wasn't a bad gun. It was dirt, sweat, and the round didn't seat properly. He cleared it, but those seconds felt like minutes. In SHTF, seconds matter more. Reliability means you've tested it under dirt, mud, rain, and after thousands of rounds. It means you know it feeds hollow points, soft points, FMJ, whatever you choose, without hiccups. The second principle is availability. Can you acquire enough now, and can you realistically replace it later? Ammo that's uncommon today becomes almost non-existent when supply chains disappear. Common calibers matter because they already exist in massive numbers. They're in civilian homes. They're in law enforcement inventories. They're in sporting goods stores. Availability is preparedness. Think about it. In a prolonged collapse, you might scavenge from abandoned houses, trade with neighbors, or find caches from old police stations. Calibers like 9mm and 5.56 are everywhere. Something like 10mm or 300 Win Mag. Good luck finding a box when the stores are empty. The third principle is controllability. This is not about strength, it's about physiology. Under stress, your body does not cooperate. Fine motor control degrades. Grip strength fluctuates. Recovery between actions slows. Lower recoil and manageable impulse allow faster recovery and better consistency when adrenaline takes over. I've seen excellent shooters struggle to keep rounds on target once stress is introduced. In training, they could shoot sub-MOA groups. In real contact, their shots went wide, because the recoil was more than their body could handle at 180 BPM. Controllability saves lives. The fourth principle is medical survivability. Enough terminal performance to stop a threat, without excessive penetration that increases collateral risk. In dense residential areas, unintended injuries are not rare. They're a recurring pattern. I've treated bystanders hit by rounds that passed through walls, through furniture, through the threat, and kept going. In suburbia, where houses are 10 feet apart, that's not a what if, it's a when. Those 4 principles should guide every decision that follows. Now let's talk honestly about handguns. Handguns are limited tools. They rely on multiple accurate hits, not raw energy. No handgun caliber reliably stops a determined threat with a single round. That's not opinion. That's decades of medical data. Modern 9mm duty ammunition performs on par with larger handgun calibers in penetration and expansion when quality loads are used. The medical outcomes are remarkably similar. What changes is controllability, capacity, and training volume. 9mm allows more accurate follow-up shots under stress. Higher capacity provides margin for error. Lower cost means more training. From a medical standpoint, I've seen many 9mm injuries remain survivable when hemorrhage control is applied quickly. That matters. I once treated a young man in the ER who took 3 9mm JHP rounds to the torso. He survived because he got pressure applied fast, and the rounds didn't over-penetrate into vital structures. Placement and follow-up saved him, not the caliber itself. Larger handgun calibers work. But the real-world differences are far smaller than most people expect. The trade-offs in recoil and capacity are very real. 10mm brings more power, but also more recoil, more penetration, and reduced controllability for most shooters. In suburban environments, that often increases unintended risk without proportional benefit. For most people, 9mm represents the best balance of effectiveness, control, availability, and sustainability. Now let's move into rifles, because this is where the biggest misunderstandings exist. Rifles introduce different medical realities. In suburbia, distances are short. Barriers are everywhere. Walls, furniture, vehicles, penetration behavior matters. 5.56 NATO offers high velocity with early yaw and fragmentation in tissue. This can limit through and through penetration compared to heavier rifle rounds. Recoil is manageable. Follow-up shots are faster. Availability is unmatched. From a medical perspective, I've treated 5.56 injuries that were severe but remained survivable with rapid hemorrhage control. At the same time, they reduced the likelihood of secondary injuries beyond the intended target. That combination matters in populated environments. In Desert Storm, I saw 5.56 do exactly that, devastating to the target. But fragments often stayed inside the body instead of exiting into the next position. In suburbia, that's a lifesaver for your family. 308 is effective and versatile. It performs well against barriers and for hunting, but it carries greater recoil, louder signature, heavier ammunition, and higher collateral risk in close residential settings. It has a role, but it demands discipline and awareness of its limitations. I've seen 308 wounds in the field that created massive permanent cavities and caused rapid exsanguination. Survivable with immediate intervention, but in a SHTF where help is hours away, the risk escalates. And in suburbia, that round can punch through multiple walls and into a neighbor's house. It's not bad ammo. It's just not ideal for every scenario. 300 Winchester Magnum is a specialized cartridge. It excels at distance and large game. It is not suited for close quarters defense in populated areas due to recoil, blast, and penetration characteristics. It belongs in a specific role. .22 long rifle deserves serious consideration for preparedness. It is affordable, lightweight, excellent for training, effective for small game, and extremely valuable for long-term sustainability. In prolonged scenarios, it fills roles that no centerfire cartridge does. I've seen .22 LR headshots stop threats cold, and body shots that became fatal due to infection when antibiotics weren't available. It's quiet, it's light, and you can stock thousands of rounds without breaking the bank or your back. From a preparedness standpoint, depth matters more than variety, training matters more than theory, and medical planning matters more than caliber debates. Preparedness isn't about certainty. It's about probability. It's about stacking odds in your favor when systems fail and mistakes carry permanent consequences. If you had to simplify your approach for suburban preparedness, the evidence points in a consistent direction. 9mm for handguns, 5.56 for rifles, not because they're perfect, but because they balance effectiveness, control, availability, and reduced unintended risk. This isn't about winning arguments. It isn't about looking impressive. It's about protecting your family while minimizing harm to the people around you. That's what real preparedness looks like. This is survival. This is resilience. This is Suburban Prepper.